Welcome to the fifth video of this series on advocacy planning training. This video will focus on advocacy message development. We'll cover four areas. Firstly, an overview of advocacy messaging. Secondly, the difference between primary and secondary messages. Thirdly, how best to deliver your advocacy messages. And lastly, selecting the best messages. Let's talk about the importance of advocacy messaging. When there's limited time to present your case, it's important to be prepared. Once you have a sense of who your target audience are, reaching them requires creating messages that will be persuasive to them. These messages must always share the same basic foundation, but should be tailored to different audiences, depending on what is important to them and what they are ready to hear. Most messages will have two fundamental components: an appeal to what is right and an appeal to that specific audience's own interest. Knowing what your audiences need to hear involves understanding what will encourage and move each target audience to action. This understanding will enable you to form strong bonds with your stakeholders and make your advocacy more effective through creating a shared sense of ownership towards reaching your advocacy objective. In order to determine what drives and moves the target audiences we spoke about in the last video, it is essential for you to have an in-depth understanding of the audience and what their own goals are. What is the target audience likely to gain from the changes you propose? How could these changes upset the target audience or conflict with their goals? You can craft effective messages to your audience through finding potential alignment between your advocacy objective and what they already care about and want to achieve. Sometimes, understanding what motivates your target audience is enough. Other times, you may need to unpack how what you want and what they want aligns and take the time to explain it to them. We'll now move on to primary messages. A primary message should be a clear, concise, and compelling statement that you can make in less than 1 minute. You need to be able to clearly summarize your goal in a persuasive way. Without a primary message, you risk losing the other person's attention, interest, or support. A primary statement will make them want to talk to you instead of you trying to force them to listen. It is this overarching statement that holds your entire advocacy campaign together. While it may be difficult, try not to create complex or overly technical messages. Simple and direct messages are more effective at gaining an audience's attention. Once you have their attention, there will be enough appropriate opportunities to explain the issue in detail. A primary message has 5 elements. A statement, which is the central idea in the message, outlining why the change is important. It can touch on the cause or analysis of the problem. Evidence, which supports the statements with facts and figures that are easy to understand, using language that is not technical and doesn't use jargon or acronyms, but is designed for clear communication. An example: adding a human element to your message so that the community you are advocating for is not just a demographic. A goal, the change you want to see, what would happen because of their support. A desired action, what steps you want to take in reaching your defined goal. This is the answer or partial answer to the problem and forms the core of an advocacy message. Messages can be primary and secondary. The primary message is the most convincing statement across all target audiences. Secondary messages are tailored to a particular target audience and explain how the objectives of the primary message will be met. There may be several secondary messages tailored to different needs of different target audiences. A secondary message is a primary message that has been altered or amended based on analysis of the following. What persuades this particular target audience the most? What does this audience already know? What might they not know? What do you want your target audience to do given their capacity? What's in their self-interest in relation to your advocacy goal? What personal interest do they have? Can the issue be linked to something they have historically supported? What are their responsibilities? And who are they accountable to? Do they already have an opinion? What is it? And how strongly is it held? Is it a public position? What objections could they have? What could they lose? What misconceptions or arguments will you need to counter? Is there anything relevant in their personal, educational, or professional backgrounds? Perhaps a bias that might turn a supporter into an opponent, or a connection that might turn an opponent into a supporter. Now that we've covered developing advocacy messages, we'll move on to how to deliver them. To determine your delivery platform, ask yourself, what are your target audience's key sources of information? Where do the messages they typically respond to come from? What are they watching, reading, or listening to? What do they find engaging? What are the characteristics of your target audience? Their age, gender, class, race, location, profession, level of access to technology. What skills, experiences, and resources do you need to work with a particular delivery platform? If you do not have them internally, can you access them in other ways? Your final decision on how your advocacy message should be delivered depends on the message itself, the messenger, and the target audience, as well as your familiarity and comfort with various delivery platforms. The impact of a message can be very different depending on who it's communicated by, and the most effective messenger differs depending on your target audience. Sometimes you need a messenger who can speak to the technical aspects of the issue, while other times you need authentic voices to talk about their lived experience and add credibility to your advocacy. In picking your messengers, it's important to ensure that you prepare them adequately with any information they may need. You also need to do whatever is possible to ensure they are comfortable to take an advocacy role. For example, you could have mock meetings with them where you take the position of the target audience so they can be at ease and deliver your message effectively when the time for the actual meeting with the target audience arrives. Some tips for you to keep in mind when deciding on messengers. Identify messengers who have influence and power over your target audience and can move them to change. Do they care about your issue? Are they credible? Think through how the messenger will access your target audience. Do they already have access? Is providing them with access realistic and feasible? Do you have adequate, meaningful access to the messengers you would like to engage with? Preparing messengers adequately with talking points and meaningful knowledge of the context and key language is a critical part of your responsibility. Do your messengers have the capacity and ability to deliver your advocacy messages effectively? Consult with your messengers to find out which target audiences will make them the most comfortable and therefore make them more effective at delivering your message. What are the risks of engaging the particular messengers you have identified? Remember that these considerations are relevant regardless of whether the messenger is someone in your own organization, from your community, or an external person. To recap, we went through an overview of advocacy messaging, the difference between primary and secondary messengers, advocacy message delivery, and lastly, identifying your messengers. The next video will take you through creating a timeline for your advocacy, identifying roles and responsibilities, and identifying resources and assets.